A country that produces everything at the cheapest price eventually reaches a point where it earns nothing at all. Today, one of the world's largest economies is struggling to survive because of what it produces: China. For years, China was on an unstoppable rise. Factories running without pause, cities that never slept, production facilities whose lights never turned off through the night. As production increased, prices fell. As prices fell, production increased even more. But today, China is entering a dangerous economic paradox. China's greatest miracle, its ability to make everything cheaper, faster, and more efficiently, has now become the real reason behind its decline. Welcome to Code 404, Economy, where the historical codes of money are revealed. The truth is always hidden in the details. China's story is the story of modern capitalism being pushed to its absolute limits. It is the story of chasing growth despite seeing the future disappear. The problem is not underproduction. The problem is overproduction. Under normal circumstances, this would be good news. More factories, more products, more growth. But this time, things are turning upside down. Let's go back to the beginning of this economic miracle. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping told China something simple: to get rich is glorious. And from that moment on, one of the fastest economic transformations in world history began. The goal was clear: attract foreign capital and export goods. A few special economic zones were opened, essentially test cities, and it worked far better than expected. Japan, the United States, and later Europe saw the gold mine in front of them: cheap labor and a government willing to cooperate. Shenzhen, now a megacity, was once a fishing village of just 30,000 people. Within 20 years, this formula spread across the entire country. Every city dreamed of becoming the next Shenzhen. Local governments chased this dream relentlessly. They built new highways, industrial zones, and power plants. The goal was simple: attract more factories. By the 2000s, China was growing at full speed and absorbing the world's demand for resources. This unstoppable rise had a single motivation: to be cheaper than everyone else. Western companies that couldn't survive this pressure moved their production to China. Eventually, almost everything produced in the world carried the label "Made in China." Local governments did everything they could to attract factories. Land got cheaper, wages were suppressed, taxes were cut, companies lowered quality, squeezed margins, and accepted lower profits. Everyone was chasing growth. Sustainability was pushed aside. What they failed to realize was this: this race did not lead to the top, it led to the bottom. An endless supply of labor moved from rural areas into cities, willing to work for extremely low wages. Factories ran nonstop. Ports never slept. And China reached the peak of wealth. That's where the paradox began. Local governments had borrowed for years to attract factories. To pay back that debt, they needed even more growth. So they built more, and more, and more. By 2015, China's industrial zones were producing more than global demand could absorb. Once supply exceeded demand, prices began to fall. This was not a choice. It was desperation. Factory profits evaporated. But instead of slowing down, production accelerated. They believed that if they increased volume, they could compensate for losses. They were wrong. Entire sectors entered a winnerless war for market share. China's economic symbols, electric vehicles, batteries, solar panels, turned into battlefields. Identical products flooded the market. Each one tried to undercut the other on price. Margins disappeared. But no one stopped. No one dared to stop. The cycle fed itself. Consumers were happy, for a while, until they realized that cheap abundance was threatening prosperity itself. China had entered the age of industrial involution. Involution migrated from sociology into economics. It came to mean not only people working more for less, but companies producing more to earn less. In a market where everyone tries to be the cheapest, price is the only thing that can fall. That's why China's solar panels are now sold below cost. Electric vehicles sit unsold in parking lots. Competition had stopped being about innovation. It had become a fight for survival. And despite record-breaking exports, industrial profits fell by more than 20% in 2024. This had happened before, in the 2000s, in coal and steel. Overcapacity crushed prices, forcing Beijing to intervene. Mines were closed, facilities were merged, hundreds of thousands of workers were laid off. China survived collapse by accepting painful medicine. 20 years later, it is happening again, but this time it's more complex. Because the patient is not one sector, it's the entire growth model. Record exports, new factories, enough electric vehicles and solar panels to supply the entire world. From the outside, it still looked like victory. On the inside, profit margins were collapsing. In 2023, China produced more than twice the world's total demand for solar energy equipment. As a result, prices dropped nearly 40% in a single year. Companies sold inventory below cost just to survive. This is what economists call overcapacity. But in China, overcapacity became policy. Local governments needed the illusion of growth. Even when demand was saturated, production continued. The same dynamic now exists in electric vehicles. More than 100 Chinese EV brands are fighting over a shrinking domestic market. All of them are trying to survive by becoming the cheapest. Government subsidies intervene, but they fuel the cycle. More supply, lower prices, thinner margins. Factories move more goods than ever and earn less from each one. The national economy grows, but the quality of that growth erodes from within. What's surprising is that this isn't entirely a mistake. Much of it is deliberate. The Chinese government has long mastered the use of subsidies to keep factories alive until competitors collapse. This is not about quarterly profits. This is about strategic monopoly. In sectors like solar panels, batteries, and electric vehicles, Beijing does not mind selling below cost, because the goal is to eliminate rivals and control the future. Local governments funnel billions into cheap credit and tax breaks for companies forced to sell below cost, not just to survive, but to destroy competitors. And often it works. Western rivals struggle to keep up and collapse. They are constrained by shareholders and short-term profit pressure. Once global supply chains become dependent on Chinese production, China gains the power to raise prices, dictate terms, and dominate value chains. The things monopolies have always done. This strategy is not new. China has done it before, in steel, shipbuilding, and rare earth elements. Each time it flooded the world with cheap supply until no alternatives remained. But this time is different. The scale is unprecedented. And these are not old industrial goods, lithium batteries, photovoltaic cells, electric drivetrains. These are the products of the future. In theory, it might work. In practice, it's questionable, because there is always a limit to how much money can be lost, and for how long. When entire sectors expect the state to absorb losses, competition shifts from innovation to subsidies. National strategy begins to turn into a national burden. This is the hidden danger behind China's approach. Every yuan spent today to keep factories alive is borrowed from tomorrow's stability. The strategy that helps China dominate markets now is beginning to consume its own economy from within. Because dominance built on losses is not victory. It is a delayed collapse. Relentlessly falling prices make the global system fragile. In the West, cheap Chinese goods once looked like a gift on store shelves. Now that same abundance exports weakness, Western factories lose competitiveness. Developing nations can't even build their own industries. And the cost of being the cheapest is paid by the entire world in stagnation. This system is not China's invention. It is history's invention. Its roots are as old as empires. Britain once flooded the world with coal. Prices fell so low that miners couldn't survive. What was the solution? Colonies. Japan hit the same wall in the 1980s. A perfect economy gave way to overcapacity and deflation. Rome followed the same path. Slave labor produced so much grain that prices collapsed, bankrupting small farmers. Abundance pushed Rome toward decline. Beijing understands this and tries to shift toward innovation and consumption, but provinces keep building more factories because incentives still reward it. The irony is this: the solar panels, electric vehicles, and batteries China produces are exactly what the world needs for its energy transition. But when prices collapse, even green revolutions can stumble. Cheap abundance destroys the incentive to produce more. It erodes efficiency. It becomes a disease. China's problem is not producing too little. It is producing far too much. Producing more than the world needs, without the demand to turn it into profit. In a system where growth is the only goal and being the cheapest is the only measure of progress, no one stays rich. This does not create development. This is industrial scale involution. And like every historical example before it, China is learning the same lesson today. There's nothing more expensive than being the cheapest. If this video gave you a new perspective, subscribe. The answers are hidden in history's codes. We reveal them.